Today is December 1st. Do you know what time of year this is? I'll tell you what time of year it is. It's that time of year when your electric bill suddenly goes up as you have lights blinking around your house. It's that time of year when your shopping budget suddenly increases exponentially. It's that time of year when kids have the right to entail long lists of items they wish for you to purchase. And they expect for their parents to purchase these items for them. It is the American holiday known as Christmas. How many of you here have received Christmas presents? Most of us, I assume, have received a Christmas present. And every year at Christmas, you wake up in the morning, look, it's Christmas. You're usually the first time you run in and wake up your parents, shaking them, wake up, it's Christmas, I want to open my presents. And so you run out there, you open all your presents, it's exciting, and sometimes you get to the end, you're like, oh, it's over. That is it. It's done. Is this it? It's over? Or maybe if you've never been a selfish, spoiled child, maybe you've watched a movie like Avatar: The Last Airbender, for example, and watched the whole thing and just was at the end going, is this it? That's it? That's the movie? It was just not worth watching. Every time in our life, sometimes we'll experience a point of just, I thought it was going to be more than this. Is this it? That's all there is to it? So today, I'd like to talk to you guys about a character in the Bible known as Elisha, and how he experienced one of those moments that we might think of as, is this it moment? But Elisha deals with the moment a bit differently than most of us would. So before we go into Elisha, I want to provide you a bit of background about his mentor, known as Elijah. Have very similar names. I think it was God's great irony this would happen. But anyways, Elijah was a man of God, a prophet. He called down fire he asked God to call down fire from heaven and burn up an altar, and he basically insulted all these prophets, just walking around in his robes like a boss. Just better fear Elijah, man. But the thing was, Elijah wasn't very well liked, because in Israel, which is known for having a bad habit of not following God, was in this time when they were doing pagan practices and worshiping idols. Well, Elijah was preaching against that, so a lot of people didn't like him too much, and it got to this point where everyone was basically trying to kill him. And he is very upset about this, and so he goes to Sinai, this mountain where Moses received the Ten Commandments, and he goes up there, and he seeks out God there, and he receives a message from God. And in the middle of his distress, he's saying, everyone is trying to kill me. I killed all these bad prophets, and now everyone's trying to come kill me now. And he receives this message that he needs to go out. Basically, God's response is, go out and you will anoint a new king, and you will anoint a prophet who will succeed you. So to us, that's almost like, you're complaining, I'm just going to replace you, Elijah. But it's actually one of these, God has a plan for Elijah, and he has a plan for this man that he's called Elijah to anoint as the next prophet, and that is Elisha. Now, we don't get much information about who Elisha is. We can presume from this story that Elijah is familiar with Elisha. They may have met at one time or another. But in any case, Elisha is a well-to-do farmer. He comes from Abel Meholah, and he's working under his father, Shaphat. That's an interesting name to take in. And he's plowing the field, just minding his own business. When we join with he's on the 12th ox team, this group of people just, plowing the field. And all of a sudden, Elijah walks up and places his mantle or his cloak on him, as in several translations. And Elisha just runs up to him and is like, what? So if you'll join with me in the story, you'll see a bit more clear of what's going on here. It's kind of confusing at first, but what we read in 1 Kings 19 through 21. We read, so Elijah went and found Elisha, son of Shaphat, plowing a field. There were 12 teams of oxen in the field, and Elisha was plowing with the 12th team. Elijah went over to him and threw his cloak across his shoulders, and then walked away. Elisha left the oxen standing there, ran over to Elijah, and said to him, First let me go and kiss my father and mother goodbye, and then I will go with you. Stop right there. What's interesting right here is that Elijah just walks up to Elisha, just puts his cloak on him, and Elisha immediately reacts. Well, what this entails is when you put your cloak on someone, when he did that, it was basically saying, you will succeed me. You will be the next prophet in my place. And Elisha just seems to immediately recognize what's going on here, and he goes after Elijah's like, let me just say goodbye to my family first, okay? And then Elijah has an interesting response. He says, Elijah replied, go on back, but think about what I have done to you. So Elisha returned to his oxen and slaughtered them. He used the wood from the plow to build a fire to roast their flesh. He passed around the meat to the townspeople, and they all ate. Then he went with Elijah as his assistant. What's interesting here is it never mentions him going back and kissing his mommy and daddy goodbye. It's more of he had a sacrifice, and he gave everything to all these other people, which is a very interesting interaction. And then he goes after Elijah to be his assistant. He ministers to Elijah. Close names there, sorry. So all this time, so for several years, he ministers to Elijah. And as you read through the narrative, you get this picture that there's probably more to this than just being a servant. It almost seems like a friendship is beginning to be established between these two, or at least Elisha thinks very highly of Elijah. In 2 Kings 2, the narrative of Elijah and Elisha picks up again. Because for a while there you mostly read about kings and what's going on between them. But then it picks up again, this narrative in 2 Kings 2, where suddenly it just starts off by saying, then came the time for Elijah to ascend into heaven. And you're just going, what? What's going on here? What just happened? And as you read, Elisha is very distressed about what's going to happen. Because like I was saying earlier, there's this idea of a friendship, or at least a father and son kind of relationship forming here. Because what happens commonly is when a prophet or individual takes someone under them, it does become a father and son kind of relationship. Like, this guy's going to succeed me. And obviously Elisha's very bothered about the idea that Elijah's going to go up and leave. Because we read that 3 times Elijah says, you basically have the opportunity, says, stay here, I'm going onward. And Elisha responds like, I'm going with you. He was going to see this through to the end. Even in the midst of his distress, he kept following Elijah. And it comes to this point where these prophets are even coming to Elisha and saying, don't you know that Elijah is going to ascend into heaven? And Elisha's response is always, yeah, don't talk to me about that. Don't even. Because he's bothered about this. He doesn't want this to happen. And eventually, it comes to the point where we read in 2 Kings 2, 9 through 10, that a very interesting thing happens. What happens is Elijah, holds out his cloak, and the river Jordan splits, and they walk across on dry land. Just Elijah being a boss again. And when they come to the other side, Elijah said to Elisha, tell me what I can do for you before I'm taken away. And Elisha replied, please let me inherit a double share of your spirit and become your successor. You have asked a difficult thing, Elijah replied. If you see me when I'm taken from you, then you will get your request. But if not, then you won't. This right here, this double share of your spirit, is also sometimes translated a double mouthful of your spirit, which is basically asking, I want the birthright. It's been equivalent. Some commentators have noted that this is not much different from how people back in those days would inherit something from their father. They would be given a birthright. This is kind of what Elisha is asking for. I want to inherit a double portion of your spirit, the spirit that's on you. For one thing, what Elisha is recognizing is Elijah's going to be gone, and I have to take up this mantle that was placed on me those years ago, and I have to be a prophet in his place. And he's recognized that I need the same spirit that's on Elijah. I can't do this. And the the narrative continues after this, they just start walking along, and we read in 2 Kings 2, 11 through 12, as they were walking along and talking, and suddenly a chariot of fire appeared. Wow. Drawn by horses of fire. It drove between the two men, separating them, and Elijah was carried by a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha saw it and cried out, my father, I see the chariots and the charioteers of Israel. And as they disappeared from sight, Elisha tore his clothes in distress. This is the point where you truly get a picture of how Elisha is attached to Elijah and how in distress he was. It came to that point, and he's just like, no! Just, one of those scenes where I just imagine him falling to his knees and be like, why? That was one of those moments when who Elisha ministered to, this man who was his mentor, was suddenly gone. And that could have been one of those moments where Elisha could have said to himself, is this it? He could have said, this is it. There's nothing else left. It's over. Elijah's gone. He could have fallen into his distress. He could have stayed there in that moment. But instead, we get a different picture of what happens. Instead of mourning the loss of his good friend and leader, his mentor, his master, we read in 2 Kings 2, 13 through 14, that Elisha picked up Elijah's cloak, which had fallen when he was taken up. Then Elisha returned to the bank of the Jordan River. He struck the water with Elijah's cloak and cried out, where is the Lord, the God of Elijah? Then the river divided and Elisha went across. Right there you have proof that Elisha has the same spirit that Elijah had. But he was in this moment of saying, where's the Lord, the God of Elijah? He's basically saying, is God with me now? Is this double portion come upon me? And we see right away that it has. And as you read through 2 Kings, you see Elisha constantly performing amazing miracles and feats. And Jewish tradition records 2 times as many miraculous things occurring to Elisha that happened to Elijah to prove that he did receive that double portion. Even unto his death, this happens. So he could have given in. He could have given in to, this is it. There's nothing more. But he didn't. In my own life, I was faced with this circumstance once. How many of you have been to youth camp? Youth camp is a crazy place, From my experience, I've witnessed hypothermia, people cutting themselves with grass, and getting sore injuries, and people hanging underwear from flagpoles. Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting place. But what I mostly remember from youth camp is the altar services. At this time, I wasn't experiencing those crying moments, Jesus, you're so awesome, and I'm so terrible, kind of moments. I wasn't experiencing those anymore, and I began to get the thought that, is this it? Have I seen all there is to see? Is there no more? Is there nothing else? And then God spoke to this man and noticed that I was getting frustrated at this idea that there was nothing else. This man came and spoke to me and said, Ty, it's not about your emotions. Emotions come and go. And that kind of opened into my eyes that I was just, that wasn't it. There was more. And as the years passed, I began to realize that God had put a calling on my life to be in the ministry. And God has put a calling in each of your lives, as he did with Elisha. He called Elisha to be a prophet. And Elisha, in his time of distress, could have given up. He didn't have to keep following Elijah. He could have given up, but he kept going. He kept on following because he knew he was loyal to his master, and also he knew he needed something. And he received that double portion and that anointing from God. Elisha didn't think, is this it? He knew God had called him, and he knew there was more. So instead of thinking, is this it? I encourage you to remember that God has called you unto himself. Whether you're called into the ministry, or even if you have no idea who God is, he's calling you unto himself. Jesus came, lived and died and rose again so that you could come unto him and have a relationship with him. So what I want to challenge you is to keep on going. Don't let your distress weigh you down. Let it push you forward. Don't give up. Seek what God has for you. Don't be afraid when the moment of request comes. If you're distressed, don't let it drown out God's call. Continue to seek him. Thank you for letting me come and speak to you guys today. I care about you and I'm praying for you during these times. Just keep following God. That's all I can encourage you to do. Thank you.